So, Jamie, tell me back at the beginning of Ascension, how did it get started?
Yeah, so in 2003 was when I really felt the Lord kind of say, "Hey, Jamie, this is what I really want you to start." And at the time, I was with a local church that I was a part of, and I was a part of the college ministry there.
Mm.
And we went to a conference, and that conference was instrumental in what Ascension is today. And I remember it was a night of worship, and um, David Crowder was leading worship that night. And I remember leaning over to the youth pastor that was at the church at the time, and I said, "Man, I really feel like we're supposed to go back and create some nights of worship."
Mm.
And at the time, I thought it was for that local church.
Mm-hmm.
So we leave the conference just like everybody does. We go home, everyone's jazzed, and you're going to change the world off of the conference.
Mm-hmm.
And I met with the pastor and shared the vision, and he's like, "This sounds awesome.
Mm.
Let's do it here. Let's see what happens." And about the second gathering we had, we realized that out of all the people that were there, only about 10% was from that local church. So I remember kind of going back and saying, "Hey, I think I might have missed it a little bit." So we're still supposed to do these nights of worship, but I really think the heart behind it is to go into local churches and invite churches from the surrounding area
Mm.
to come together and unite together in worship. And when I shared the vision, he said, "Look, whatever we can do to be a part of it, we want to send you off." And 2004 is when Ascension officially started.
Mm.
And the goal was to ignite a passion within the local church. And the way that we saw that was to gather churches together, multiple
Yeah.
denominations, and have a night of worship where everybody comes together. And hopefully, through that unity, we send out and have a bigger impact in the community.
Mm.
So that was 2004. 2005 was a big growth year for us. We saw a lot more churches letting us come in
Mm.
and do those nights of worship. But in 2006, our paths crossed.
Right.
And what did you see from your perspective coming in that drew you to Ascension?
Yeah. The drawing force for me was walking in and seeing the amount of unity that was taking place um, on the team itself.
What what how much unity did you see within the team that came together each
So
month?
it was incredible because of the team, the people that were gathered around the table planning the event. All of us were from different churches. I don't think there was any more than two people from the same church.
Wow.
And so the entire table was filled with people with different ideas, different backgrounds, putting together this event to pull people together in a unified body.
How many churches you think were represented before a single person came to the event?
We probably had 15, 20 churches just around the table, the people that were engaged in planning the
And
event,
setting up the event and
setting up the event, blood, sweat, and tears,
yep,
putting those things
yep.
together.
So
Yeah,
so we would roll in on a Thursday night.
right.
So we would find a local church that would let us come in, and not just for one night, but two-night takeover.
That's right.
And we would set up Thursday night
Full
and
production.
full production. And at the time, we had just a huge partner.
Oh,
Even today, Stephen Unkelbach
absolutely.
with
AVL.
AVL was
Mm.
instrumental and caught the vision and made sure that we had lighting, audio, and video at
Everything
every
we
event
needed.
that we did.
Yes.
And so we would roll in with his team on Thursday night, and we would set up. We
Yeah.
would do basically a dry run
Mhm.
rehearsal, and then Friday night. What did Friday night look like?
So Friday night we'd roll in. Everybody get off work because we were all working regular jobs and coming in, rolling in as quick as we could. Um, do a quick line check, gather together as a team back in the back room, pray, walk through
Yeah.
through the night, make sure that we had our vision in place for what the night was going to take, how it was going to take place, and then roll the curtains back. And I mean, I remember walking out. I got to introduce you guys so many nights, and welcome people to the night, and watching those crowds grow from 50 to 100 to 500. It was incredible watching churches come together and catch the vision that you had in
Yeah.
2003.
And one thing that we saw through the years, obviously, um, every event we would have, more musicians would come out, more musicians wanted
Right.
to be a part of what, God was doing in the city.
Mhm.
And I remember we rolled in, we would meet every Monday night. It was, and even
Still do.
today, we would meet every Monday night. And
Yeah.
I remember in 2010, we rolled in on that meeting, and we just felt like God was kind of stirring
Mhm.
in us, because at the time I was fielding a lot of phone calls
Mhm.
from pastors, worship leaders saying, "Hey, Jamie, I know you have a lot of musician connections, obviously from all the years of doing events,
Mhm.
and our church is really in need of this." Or, "Hey, Jamie, we had a last minute cancellation. Do you know any drummers that might be available?"
Mhm.
And these conversations kept coming up all the time.
Mhm.
And it finally hit one day that I'm like, this is a serious need within the local church, because one drummer that cancels on a Saturday night
Right.
changes the whole landscape for a Sunday morning service. So I
Right.
think it was more of the fielding the calls that were coming in
Mhm.
and realizing what God has been preparing all those years, that maybe this is what resourcing the local church
Mm.
might look like in the future.
One of the organizations we were partnered with at that point too was Youthquake Live,
Yes.
and Sean Yost had done such a great job
Yes.
of bridging that gap and making churches come together, be unified, and share talent. And so I think that was a natural extension out of that relationship. That is, as we kind of grafted into that team with him, they felt comfortable coming to you and
Absolutely.
asking you those questions
Yep.
because we had taken on that same mindset that we weren't going to poach from one church to
Yep.
send to another. We were going to use gifts and use them responsibly.
And since you mentioned that, you know, early on, our whole goal was to try and, hey, how do we just allow church A and church B to help each other?
Right.
Because what happens within cities is you'll have a large church pop up
Mm.
that over time becomes a vacuum of talent to other surrounding churches in that city.
Mm.
And it's not that church A did it intentionally.
Mm-hmm.
It's just maybe church A was, moving into something that might be new into an area that attracts musicians.
Right.
So what we saw early on was like, man, how cool would this be? A negative thing, perception wise, for
Mm-hmm.
church B is, hey, we've lost all of our musicians to church A, and we're kind of a little upset about it.
Right.
How cool would it be to create a safe system that allows church A to be able to say, hey, I've got 4 bass players, which we can only use one.
Right.
How cool would it be to be able to send them out back into the city through a safe
Mm.
system and allow them to be a resource to other churches?
Right.
So what we found was, all of a sudden, musician goes to church B and church B says, hey, what church are you from? Do you have a home church?
Mm.
Oh yeah, I go here. And all of a sudden it's this unifying thing where,
Sure.
oh my goodness, it's coming full circle.
Yeah, the big church becomes the benefit to the small church instead of
Yes.
just being something that sucked all the resources out of
Yep.
those smaller ones.
So I think that was just one of the really cool ways that we
Right.
saw
Right.
the unifying thing within a city happening. As a leadership team, we really
Yeah.
said, man, what we feel that's happening is God's kind of lining out a way for us to really help resource the local churches that we're a part of.
There was a shift that took place then where the churches as a whole were doing nights of worship on their own, and that we didn't need to be providing a night of worship, the way that we had for so many years because
That's
they were
good.
doing it themselves.
Yep.
It's kind of like what when we rolled into doing musicians and sourcing churches with musicians the way that it has, we've always built that foundation of we're here until you can take this on yourself.
Mm.
And we built that out of a time where we're doing events until you're going to do it yourself. And they took it over themselves and we shifted gears.
I remember the last event that we did was June of 2013, and we rolled out of that event. It was probably one of our best ones that we've ever done, and we rolled into that next meeting, and we felt that God was saying, "Hey, the events are done,
Yeah.
and we really want you guys to focus on how you can resource the local church." And I would say from that day on, it has been a whirlwind of, where are the needs and how can Ascension come in and help resource.
Right.
Sometimes it's a musician. Sometimes that musician is just the front door to us to get into that local church and help with audio needs, install needs, or, hey, have you ever thought about the best way to do a volunteer program?
Right.
Or, hey, Mark, how can we run more of a successful rehearsal?
Sure.
So, what do you think Ascension looks like today if you were to kind of summarize it?
So today, we're sourcing churches with musicians. We're sourcing them with audio technicians. We're providing training for staffs and for volunteers. We're helping build out those environments, and creating those environments for people to walk into the local church and encounter God. We're filling the gap where a lot of pastors don't have that experience, and getting them over the hump so that they can do what they're called to do instead of having to do all those extra things that they really aren't necessarily gifted in.
One thing that I love from day one when we started talking about what does it look like for a musician to go into a local church. We kind of from the very beginning thought of it like music missionaries.
Right.
And it was not a gig mentality.
Yeah.
We wanted to create a system that allowed people to serve local churches. And naturally there was an exchange that happened, but we really wanted the musicians that were going to go to churches to be there to help the local church that they're at.
Right.
And I think even to this day we still see that it's at a larger scale than it was in 2010.
True.
But the main focus is Ascension does not send a musician long term at a local church,
Right.
because that defeats our ministry, our mission. We want to fill the gap when a volunteer is not available.
Right.
It actually, for us to send somebody long term at a church, actually goes against what we do. We really believe that the church needs to be raising up the volunteers, and sometimes that starts in the youth. Sometimes that's training up youth to get to a spot to where they fill the spot in main service or whatever that looks like. But even today, like, the goal is for us to come in and be a resource for that moment in time.
Right. As we started to grow beyond just resourcing the local church with musicians, tell me about the become a member trend that we kind of rolled out so that we could grow the network in a different direction also.
Yeah, so what we found was, the church that needed a musician would have to become a member of Ascension to be able to get those resources. And at the time, we really felt there were some other avenues that we could help the church, but we just needed a way to get it to the church.
Right.
And not every church needed necessarily a musician, but every church needed resources.
Right.
And so I remember in 2014, we started this Become a Member. And I think out of everything that we've done, that has really just blown our socks off in the sense of what God has just opened up. And it allowed churches, worship leaders to be able to say, you know what, I do need resources.
Yeah.
And that is something that I want to be a part of. Yeah. So we really saw in a very short time, a community of believers and churches, worship leaders
Mhm.
coming together and becoming a member. And that's been really cool. What are some of the main things that you saw we were able to send to those churches?
So we started right off the bat by leveraging the buying power that we had because we had members that were spread not just in Jacksonville, they spread across Florida and then the Southeast and then up the East Coast and started going west, into the Midwest and then out west into the, Colorado
Mm-hmm.
and California out that direction. And we leveraged that buying power so that new church plants come in, they all need the exact same stuff. You got to buy that sound equipment, you got to buy your lighting
That's true.
equipment, those same things that can be expensive if you're on an island out by yourself.
Yep.
But leveraging the buying power of a network that's, covering most of the US at that point.
So you saw by them becoming a member, they gained access
Absolutely.
to a larger buying power because Ascension provided AVL, audio, lighting, and
Right. Right. And it opened the door then, not just for the buying power, but also the tech resources that we had. I mean, Chad does a great job with Tech Tuesday, and
yes,
I mean it's grown. He sold it to us long
early
before
on.
we ever saw the value in it,
Very.
and grew that thing to over 100 different podcasts now that are out there
Yep.
that are training resources used by churches all across the country, around the
Yep.
world
Around
now
the
at this
world.
point.
Yep.
So it's
Yeah, my favorite thing is seeing those emails coming in. Chad, love this episode of Tech Tuesday.
right.
I'm having this problem, and it could be somewhere across the world. And
Yeah.
sure enough, within, a very short time, Chad's replying and saying, hey, here's a fix,
Right.
try this. So
Yeah.
just being able to resource in that way has been something we didn't see coming.
I like seeing in a post, that, hey, I'm having this problem, and seeing somebody outside of our network
Tag it.
respond back. Here's a video that gives you that information you're looking for,
Oh, man.
and seeing this a Tech Tuesday video.
Love that.
Yeah.
So the other thing that we rolled out that we thought would be a huge resource was the songs.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. City Worship Project.
City Worship Project. And I think that has been pretty cool to watch. And that's really, we launched that in 2014, and the goal was to get songs from the church to the church.
Right.
And the way that we saw that happening was we basically just asked songwriters and artists, look, if you write songs and you feel like it is a song that, God laid on your heart and you think the church could benefit, submit those songs.
Right.
And to date, we would release 9 to 10 songs a year. And that has been really cool, and hearing the feedback from those songs, and that's a free resource.
Right.
By becoming a member, you're getting that once a month release, which we record those songs in our studio. We get resources, tracks, charts, and the recording. We send that out to our members. And what's happening this year?
Yeah, that's the part that, the thing that I've loved watching is the map of membership. We watched it grow across the U.S., but then it grew into England without us doing anything. God opened that door, and we started, trying to figure out, why is this happening? We were at a conference 2 years ago, I think, and we had a guy come over. He was from England and knew about who we were. We started asking him, why are we having an impact and we don't understand it? And he explained to us, music in America is cheap. You can pick up a song for $5-10, no big deal, with all your resources that you need. Overseas, that can be a $30 or $40 investment for one song, and then you got to buy the resources on top of it. It could put you back, $100.
$100.
Churches just don't have that to spend over there. So when we're giving them a free song every month, they're getting, a whole CD over the course of the year of new music from the church to the church.
Wow.
And, from that, we watched the network, then it expanded.
Brazil.
South America.
Yeah.
So across North America, South America, Central America, there's only 2 countries that we're not represented in. You move over into Europe, and there's 4 countries that we're not represented in Europe, Asia. There's a handful in Africa. We're in more than half of the countries in Africa now.
Man.
God's just opening doors like crazy. And we talked, earlier this year, how do we steward this?
Yeah.
God's opening these doors and providing a way for us to provide resources. What are we going to do with that? And that's really launched us coming out of COVID to get back in the studio and to really kick in on this.
So what are one of the ways 2023 does that look like?
So City Worship Project is not just going to be in English any longer. Tonight we were listening to one of the songs recorded and translated into Spanish now.
Man.
So
we're looking
really
for potentially
Absolutely.
Spanish, Portuguese,
French.
and French.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Man, that's exciting.
It's going to be awesome. So going back to 2019, we launched what on the outside looks like a touring arm of Ascension. Tell me a little bit about Ascension Collective.
So Ascension Collective really is kind of like, I would say, almost the heartbeat of everything we've been doing these last couple of years. From the outside, it looks like the touring arm because we do go and do youth camps, to conferences, to big nights of worship. But really the heart of it was to create a team that isn't just great musicians and great worship leaders, but each person that's on that team has a heart to teach and train. So really the heart of the collective is to go into a local church and to provide that night of worship at a large scale, a cost-effective large scale, but also be able to roll into that next day and train, equip that local church, whether it's from effective rehearsals to vocal coaching to even band, electric guitar, tone classes to, drum classes. Everybody that's a part of the collective has a role. It's not just as a musician. So that's what I love about it.
I know in our meetings, when we talk about it, we talk about building your event. How does that play into setting up, and putting together an event for somebody?
Yeah. So we have several worship leaders that are part of the collective all over the country. So you literally could go to ascensioncollective.co and build out your event. You could pick the worship leader you think that would fit best for your event that night and just give us details about what's going on. And we basically put our collective team together and we come out and do your event.
Awesome.
Yeah. So very cool, wide range of worship leaders. That way it kind of fits whatever, church environment we're going into.
Very cool. So in thinking about the Ascension Collective, what's some of your favorite moments?
Man, right offhand, I would say, anytime that the collective gets to go in and let's say do a youth camp, our goal is not just to go in and do a one-off event. Our goal is to go in and build relationships, something that's going to last. So I know all our team loves each year when that repeat youth camp comes through because we invest while we're there. And to be able to go back, especially 2 or 3 years in a row and just see the progression of worship in these kids really just ignites a passion within the team. So much that this past summer, we had a lot of youth camps going and probably a couple weeks out from the start of everything, we get a phone call from one of our churches that we've probably done 3 years in a row. And something had come up and they said, man, Jamie, we were going to in-house this and some things fell through and we're in a bind. And literally it was going from 1 week and we had about a 2-day window that their camp was. And it was going to put a lot on our team. But when they found out who, like the church, and it literally was going to be our 4th year doing it with them, the team was just jazzed and said, hey,
awesome.
Whatever it needs, we're going to get the equipment there and the team's going to come and we're going to lead those kids in worship. And it was honestly a very impactful weekend for the church and for the collective.
Nice.
So we love going and investing because we know it's going to be a relationship that we're going to have for the long haul, not just for that one event.
Mm-hmm.
So as God continues to kind of open up doors, that one thing that I've enjoyed about this team and the leadership that God has brought is, you know, vision is always moving.
Mm.
And I can say the life of this ministry, you know, he has brought the right people at the right time.
Mm.
And there's been incredible people that's been a part of this organization,
Mm.
and they've been here at the right time to
Right.
propel us into what's next.
Absolutely.
And I'm excited about what's in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And we all know that it could look different, and we're okay with that.
Right.
But right now, you know, just seeing what he's going to do through these songs and through musicians going and helping local churches
Mm.
and going into local churches and training them
Right.
in ways to get better. That's just exciting. So,
Absolutely.
you know, since 2004 to now, you know, I am excited to see what God does in the future.
Absolutely.